Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. If you're like me and trying to make sense of the latest in American politics, well, you know it's a lot right now.
It really is, and without the spin. That's what we
Yeah.
try to do here, right? Cut through it all.
Absolutely. No bias, just a deep dive into the facts. And we've got a really fascinating collection of sources for you today, from legal battles and shifting international ties to, well, let's just say some unusual election dynamics.
Oh yeah, we've got some wild stuff to unpack. Domestic politics, legal challenges, international relations, even some early economic indicators.
Plenty to think about. So let's dive in, shall we? I'm really curious about these legal cases against the executive branch.
hmm
Jenner and Block, Perkins Coie, these aren't small-time firms. What's the core of their argument?
Well, with Jenner and Block, their lawsuit is basically saying that this executive order, it crosses the line constitutionally. They say it's intended to, make it harder for them to do their legal work, to chill free speech, if it's critical of the administration.
It almost sounds like they're saying the administration is trying to punish them for representing certain clients or even expressing certain views.
Right. And they're worried about the real-world consequences, especially for their clients who happen to be government contractors. You can imagine the pressure on a company that relies on federal contracts if they're told, hey, maybe you should think about dropping your lawyer.
Especially a long-standing firm. Makes you wonder, what kind of chilling effect is this having?
And it's not just theoretical. I mean, Jenner and Block say 40% of their revenue comes from these government contractors. They even have examples of clients being told, the Jenner lawyers wouldn't be allowed in meetings at the Justice Department.
So it's getting pretty concrete.
Yeah, it's not just about principles. There are actual business concerns.
And isn't Perkins Coie in a similar boat?
Hmm.
Didn't a judge already put a temporary block on some parts of a related order in their case?
Yeah, Judge Beryl Howell.
Oh.
And it seems she's likely to hear Jenner and Block's case, too. This could set a really interesting legal precedent.
What's the backstory here? Why these particular firms?
Well, if you look at it, these executive orders seem to be tied to the Mueller investigation. You remember Jenner and Block? They used to employ Andrew Weissman. He was one of the key prosecutors. And Wilmer Hale, another firm that's being targeted, that was Mueller's old firm.
Interesting. So is this retaliation for past involvement?
It certainly seems that way. And then you have Perkins Coie. They did some work for Hillary Clinton's campaign. The timing and targets raise some serious questions.
You know, it makes you wonder about the approach of another firm, Paul Weiss. I read that they reportedly cut a deal with the administration, doing some pro bono work and kind of distancing themselves from previous investigations.
That's a really different approach, isn't it? And it highlights how much pressure these firms are under. This situation has much bigger implications, though. It makes you think about the relationship between the executive branch and the legal establishment in Washington.
For sure. I mean, these firms have worked with both sides of the aisle. They have deep connections in the government. This could really change how things work in the Capitol. But, it's not just domestic relationships that seem to be shifting. We've got this AP-NORC poll suggesting a change in how Americans view Canada.
What's striking to me is that the decline in positive views of Canada is happening on both sides of the political spectrum. Democrats, Republicans, fewer of them see Canada as a close ally.
And it's hard not to connect that to some of the things that have been happening between the two countries, right? I mean, the tariffs, for example.
Yeah, 25% on imported cars, that's not nothing. And then a talk of reciprocal taxes.
Not to mention the talk of, potentially absorbing Canada.
As the 51st state. And, downplaying the Canadian Prime Minister, calling him a governor, not exactly friendly gestures.
Definitely not. What's the reaction been like in Canada?
Well, we've seen reports of people feeling betrayed. Some instances of the U.S. national anthem being booed. Even some stores removing American liquor from their shelves. There's definitely a growing sense of resentment.
Prime Minister Mark Carney said that the U.S. is no longer a reliable partner and that Canada needs to look out for ourselves. Pretty strong words.
Definitely a sign of tension.
It's interesting, though, that the poll also shows differing opinions among Americans. One Republican respondent viewed these actions as a negotiating tactic to secure a better trade deal, but a Democrat expressed concern about the damage being done to a long-standing positive relationship.
It's a good reminder that there are multiple perspectives on these things. The same actions can be seen very differently depending on your outlook.
True. And the poll looked beyond Canada, too. It seems views on alliances with countries like France, Germany, even the UK are kind of in flux.
The one thing that was consistent, almost nobody considers Russia or China a close ally, which, given current tensions, probably isn't surprising. So maybe what we're seeing is a recalibration of America's traditional alliances, or at least how Americans perceive those alliances.
Let's shift gears a bit. The situation in Wisconsin is really something. Elon Musk injecting himself into the state Supreme Court race.
The plan to hold a rally and hand out $2 million to voters who've already cast their ballots is raising a lot of eyebrows, to say the least.
Yeah, especially considering Wisconsin law, right? Isn't offering anything of value in exchange for voting a felony.
It is. And, only allowing those who have already voted to attend the rally doesn't exactly make it less controversial.
Talk about high stakes. The winner of this election will determine the ideological balance of the court. Plus, we're talking record-breaking campaign spending. It's already a tense race, with Trump endorsing Brad Schimmel and Susan Crawford getting support from Democrats.
And this isn't even Musk's first foray into this election. He'd previously offered $1 million to someone for signing a petition against activist judges. Then he offered $100 to anyone who'd sign or share it.
Oh, yeah, that was quite a story. So are these attempts to sway the voters or what? What's the reaction been?
Susan Crawford's campaign called Musk's visit a last-minute desperate distraction, said Schimmel's his lackey. Things are definitely getting heated.
And the money flowing into this race is unbelievable. Musk and his allies have reportedly spent over $20 million for Schimmel. And on the other side, you have George Soros and J.B. Pritzker putting money into Crawford's campaign.
It makes you wonder what's driving this level of investment in a state judicial race. Remember Tesla's lawsuit against Wisconsin?
Oh, right. They want to be able to sell cars directly to consumers.
Exactly. They want to open dealerships. And some people are saying Musk's involvement in this election is a way to influence the judges who might eventually rule on that case.
Smart, maybe, but is it ethical?
That's a good question. And it's not just about dealerships. Think about what the Wisconsin Supreme Court decides. Abortion rights, redistricting, the power of unions. This election could have huge consequences.
Absolutely. Speaking of potential consequences, what did you make of Hillary Clinton's recent opinion piece criticizing the Trump administration?
Well, she certainly didn't hold back, calling the administration dumb and dangerous. She thinks their approach is making the U.S. weaker on the world stage, hurting our alliances.
She had some specific concerns, too, right?
Yeah, like those reports of military plans being discussed on Signal, a chat app, and the downsizing of the federal workforce, which, by the way, has been overseen by Elon Musk. Then there's the whole dismantling of USA, the agency that provides foreign aid.
So it's not just about military power. It's about diplomacy and aid and all those other tools of foreign policy.
Exactly. She calls the administration's approach dumb power versus smart power. She thinks they're prioritizing brute force over strategic thinking. And, maybe overlooking the importance of things like diversity initiatives in the military.
Interesting take. Meanwhile, here at home, the administration is facing pushback on the executive order that aims to curb the power of federal unions.
Yeah, this order really limits who can organize and essentially tries to shut down collective bargaining in many federal agencies. Union leaders are calling it union busting, a blatant attempt to silence them. Some are even pointing to the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 as the inspiration behind this.
And this impacts a lot of people. We're talking about 30% of federal workers, over 1.2 million people who are union members. And they're not taking this lying down, are they?
Not at all. They're vowing to fight it in court. They see it as a direct attack on their right to represent their members.
It's worth remembering that federal unions don't have the same negotiating power as those in the private sector. Their scope is limited.
Yeah, they can mainly bargain over working conditions. Things like wages and benefits are usually set by law. So this executive order targets what little negotiating power they already have. But, it's not all smooth sailing for the administration. Remember Elise Stefanik?
The congresswoman.
Yeah, she was nominated to be the UN ambassador, but she withdrew because she was worried about losing her House seat in a special election.
Ah, so the slim Republican majority in the House is making them cautious.
Makes you think about the limits of executive power, right? Even when it seems unchecked, there are these political realities that come into play. And this, combined with a bunch of other recent challenges, the whole Yemen strike, group chat controversy, the confusion over federal workforce cuts, the stalled Ukraine peace efforts, it paints a picture of a White House that's, well, maybe not having the best week.
And how about the economic front? What are we seeing there?
Not all sunshine and roses. Consumer confidence is down. Concerns about inflation and a potential recession are up.
I imagine those new tariffs on imported cars aren't helping.
Yeah, they're expected to drive up vehicle prices.
Hmm.
Not great news for anyone looking to buy a car.
Of course, the White House is trying to accentuate the positive.
Oh, yeah, they're pointing to things like the new investment from Hyundai and the arrest of a leader of MS-13. But it's clear that there are some very different narratives emerging about how things are going in the country.
It really depends on who you ask. For some, Trump's second term is about fulfilling campaign promises, things like increased deportations and tariffs.
Right. And for others, those same policies are seen as damaging and ineffective.
Two very different takes. So what we've tried to do in this deep dive is present you with the facts as we found them from a whole range of sources. We've got legal battles, international relations, domestic politics, the economy. It's a lot to process.
It really is. And our goal has been to present these different perspectives without picking sides. We want you to be able to draw your own conclusions.
Exactly. So as we wrap up, here's a final question for you to think about. Given everything we've discussed, the legal challenges, the strained relationships abroad, the political maneuvering at home, the economic anxieties, what single factor do you think will have the biggest impact on where the country goes in the coming years? And what makes you think so? Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.